Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Ian Cromwell. I just want to take a moment here to thank you so much for inviting me. It's my great pleasure to be here today. The talk of my title this morning is Don't Go In There, talking about race, racism, and race issues in the time of the zombie apocalypse. Before I start, the organizers have asked me to make a quick announcement, and that is that the zombie apocalypse is upon us. While you were listening to the last couple of presentations, a mutated strain of the tuberculosis virus has broken out and killed about 90% of the world's population. The survivors, including ourselves, are all still infected. The weird thing about this particular strain of tuberculosis is that it seems to turn just seemingly ordinary people into bloodthirsty, flesh-ripping zombies. Other people report headaches. Jenny McCarthy said it turned her son into a newt, but he got better. But unfortunately, there's no cure. And so we in this room represent humanity's only hope of surviving this terrible apocalypse. And you know why that is? Because everyone in this room is a goddamn zombie expert. Let me show you what I mean. Well, that's really handy because, like, a big part of this presentation involves video. This hourglass represents racism. Just think about it. It'll get you.
Vivian's here. Vivian, honey, sweetie, are you okay?
Okay, is there anyone here who doesn't know exactly what's about to happen? By the way, this presentation is about zombies, so if anyone's squeamish about blood and guts and stuff, you might not want to watch this next part. Oh, well, what's happening right now is exactly what you think is going to happen. It has nothing to do with the connection. Yeah, so there you go. So how did you know what was going to happen? Well, was it psychic powers or maybe like divine revelation or a prophecy that you read somewhere? No. You knew what was going to happen because you've either seen this movie before or you've seen one that's very much like it before. In other words, you have experience with zombie outbreaks. You've read the relevant literature and you know what the warning signs are. And also there's the music. Before we go too far, I should probably introduce myself. As I said before, my name is Ian Cromwell, and I am, among other things, the author of the Crommunist Manifesto on the Free Thought Blogs network. And as far as why I'm here because we're all in danger. And the only way that we're going to get out of the zombie apocalypse alive is if I can train all of you to become an elite force of zombie hunters. I need to pass along the knowledge and skills that you're going to need so that you can notice the danger before it happens, so that you can get the drop on the zombies before they get the chomp on you. And why listen to me about this? Well, first of all, my academic training is in epidemiology and biostatistics, and as everyone knows, the one person you want at your side during a zombie apocalypse is an epidemiologist. But beyond that, my chief qualification is that I've been black in Canada my whole life. I've been black in small mountain towns in British Columbia. I've been black in big cities like Toronto and Vancouver. I've been black in racially homogenous environments. I've been black in racially heterogeneous environments. And what I've learned over the years is that the consequences of my blackness, what it means, not only to me, but to other people, changes quite radically depending on the situation in which I find myself. And so as a result, I've spent more and more time digging in and really focusing and trying to get a handle on how we talk about race in this country, but in this society more broadly. So what does being black have to do with fighting zombies? Well, first of all, like zombies, racism often seems to come out of nowhere. You're just having a nice chat with somebody, and then all of a sudden, boom, racism. And second, and I can't state this enough, both zombies and racism are trying to devour our brains all the time. If we're not careful, if we get complacent, we're going to find ourselves overrun. But there's good news. Because also like zombies, racism is actually pretty predictable and consistent if you've got the right skills, experience, and instincts. And this is especially good news because it means that we can learn to avoid, or even in some cases, combat racism in the same way that we would use our knowledge to combat zombies. So in other words, this is the main point I'm trying to make here. Spotting zombies early can save your life. We're in the middle of the zombie apocalypse, people. If you want to survive, you got to keep your head on a swivel, you got to keep your wits sharp, and you got to keep focused. And years of examining race and racism have given me the skills that I'm going to pass on to you so that we can all get out of this thing alive. Now, earlier, I said that we were humanity's best hope, and I mean that. You know why? Because this is a room full of skeptics. And if there's one group of people who I think can pick up the skills and the training that we need in a timely manner, it's skeptics. We use our skepticism all the time when we're evaluating claims about science, about medicine, about religion. Some of us even bring our skeptical tools to bear when we talk about politics or economics. So here's the question. Why can't we become skeptics about race? The first step to getting there is to establish some basic definitions. What is race? I'm going to go ahead and assume that everyone in this room is well educated enough to know that race is not simply skin color. It's not some collection of physical characteristics. You've all probably heard of the We Are All African campaign, which is a reflection of the fact that scientific inquiry shows us that humanity shares an origin. And genetic inquiry has also shown us that there's more differences within racial groups than there is between racial groups. So if it's not just skin color, is it simply identity? You know, I call myself black, but if I were to call myself white, which hereditarily speaking is just as true, would you accept me as a white person? What if I looked the way that I do, but I just felt Asian? Would you accept me as an Asian guy? Do you think that other Asian people would accept my claim on their heritage? Here's the point I'm driving at. Race is a socially defined construct. It's something that we as a society, as a culture, have decided to recognize as having some kind of discriminant validity. In other words, we've made it up. The way that race works is that it's a collision between a person's ethnic background, what that background means to that person, and then how they're perceived by some other party. And that could be another individual, it could be government, it could be a law, it could be a number of things. But it's an event that occurs when biology and self-identity and perception collide. It's perhaps easiest to think of it as something that happens to you rather than something that emerges from who you are. But there's something here that I cannot stress enough. This does not mean that race is not real. We see the effects of race. We know it has effects. We know it does stuff. You know, we look at things like discrimination in political or social systems like government, or the tendency of groups to aggregate, which is often high status groups moving away from low status groups. We saw tons of it in the recent US presidential election with people trying to distinguish real Americans from those other Americans. But if you ask Ezra Levant of Sun News, or you ask Minister of Citizenship and Immigration Jason Kenney, ask them about refugees, Roma refugees from Hungary, and you'll find out we're capable of the same kinds of thoughts and ideas here. Let's shift gears for a second and get to a slightly different question. What is racism? Again, this is not such an easy question to answer. I mean, we could do the convenient thing and go to the dictionary, which is, so the dictionary definition's here, and the precise wording varies from dictionary to dictionary, but they usually focus on these three main ideas. That it's this belief that there's a difference between races and that one race is better. It's a policy or a system that puts that and sort of encapsulates that idea, that discrimination, and makes it official. And then it's hatred of another group or other groups. Are there any problems that you can see with this definition? Is there anything in there that's maybe inaccurate or perhaps incomplete? Well, we know that there's a lot of ways besides personal interactions where racism can play a role. A recent review of the so-called stand your ground gun laws in the United States found that in cases where the shooter is white and the victim is black, these cases are 40% more likely to be exonerated in states that have a stand your ground gun law than in states that don't. That looks like racism to me. We also know that people can say and do racist things without necessarily meaning to. I mean, just ask Raffi Torres, who decided it would be a good idea for Halloween one year to dress up in blackface. And of course, there was a backlash, and understandably so. The problem with the dictionary definition is that it's rooted in this 20th century understanding of what racism is. We're taught with these monumental and dramatic examples of things like Jim Crow segregation laws in the American South, or even maybe going as far back as slavery. We look at genocides in Rwanda and Serbia. We look at apartheid in South Africa, and we say, that's racism. And it is. But that's not all that racism is. So if the dictionary definition isn't sufficient, can we come up with a better one? I think we can, and I want to offer this as a starting place. First, we'll keep the first part of the dictionary definition, this belief that race is something that meaningfully informs someone's ability, someone's achievement. Second, we take a consequentialist approach, and we identify specific behaviors and actions that result in group differences that are based on race. So this includes things like hiring discrimination or housing discrimination, but it also includes our stand your ground gun law. And third, because we know that these behaviors don't happen in a vacuum, we can also include the attitudes, the ideas that underpin these behaviors. So we can look at, the racist history of blackface and what it says and what kind of stereotypes it perpetuates about African Americans. And then we can properly identify it as racist, even if Mr. Torres didn't mean it in that way. Now, this definition is not perfect. It's not exhaustive, but it's much better than the dictionary definition for a few reasons. First, it describes the kind of racism that happens outside the context of interpersonal interactions. Not all racism happens face-to-face. Not all of it is personal. Second, it recognizes that racism can occur even in the absence of a conscious mind. Stand your ground is not a breathing, thinking, living entity. It's just words on a piece of paper. But it's words on a piece of paper that create a disparity between racial groups, or maybe not creating it, at least makes an existing one far worse. And third, and perhaps most importantly, it recognizes that the proper focus of our attention should be on outcomes and not people's intentions. Focusing on intention basically just gives anyone an airtight excuse to say or do whatever they want, the most racist thing possible, and then just get away with it by saying, well, I didn't mean it in a racist way. It doesn't matter whether or not you mean it. The effects of your actions still impact other people. And all you're doing by focusing on intention is trying to escape responsibility for the consequences. It's worth noting that this isn't a new definition or a radical departure from the old one. We're still talking about the kind of colloquial definition, the colloquial racism that we saw in the dictionary definition. We're just recognizing that that definition doesn't tell the whole story. Let's switch our focus for a second and ask a related but a different question. What is a racist? You hear people talk about this a lot. They say, so-and-so is such a racist. I'm not a racist. The Republicans, they're a bunch of racists. But what's a racist? What I can piece together from the way that people use the phrase is that we're talking about someone with an overt, conscious hatred of people from another racial group. Someone who hates black people, or who hates First Nations Canadians, or who hates Chinese people, or whatever. But they do so with a specific hatred, an animus, and in an overt way. In other words, we're talking about this kind of racist. A raving hate monger who's indiscriminately hateful towards each and every member from another group. But here, we run into the exact same problem, right? Outside of people who are in professing hate groups, that kind of racist is thankfully pretty rare. But we know very well from reading the literature and just from everyday lived experience that people can do racist things without necessarily meaning to or even recognizing that what they've done is racist. And in fact, people will deny having done something racist until they're dead. So what if we do the same thing with the definition of a racist that we did with the definition of racism. Let's say that a racist is someone who says or does or believes a racist thing. Well, are we talking about someone who does this all the time? Or maybe not all the time, but habitually? How many times would you say that you have to do a racist thing before you're a racist? Is it like 100 times? Or maybe it's like 25? You know, you can burn 24 crosses, no problem, not racist at all. But you burn one more, oh no, that's too many. Now you're a racist. Okay, so if it's not all the time, is it just ever? If you have a racist idea in your head, or you do a racist thing, does that make you a racist? Here's the problem with defining it that way, and I really hope the video works this time. Awesome.
Don't come any closer. They're behind us. Jesus.
They're everywhere. Guys, they're everywhere. They're all around it.
Under that definition, pretty much everybody's a racist. We're all capable of saying or doing things that have racial content. Sometimes, often, we don't even know that it's happening until someone points it out to us. So is there any way around this conundrum? Well, maybe the phrase "a racist" doesn't actually mean anything. Maybe we just have to recognize that all of us are born into a society and into a history where racism has played and continues to play a major role. Any honest reading of our history will show that our past is run through with a deep vein of racism that still informs what happens today. And maybe we just need to recognize that we're all capable of lousy cognition from time to time. You know, no matter how pure or how informed we'd like to be, nobody's perfect. This is part of being human, because we have shitty mammal brains. We're pattern seekers. We rely on all kinds of psychological heuristics just to get us through the day. We don't have time to test every single thing that crosses our mind against the evidence. So we look around, we see inequalities between groups, and we assume that there's a good reason for it. We don't do it consciously, it's just how our brains work. So now that we've defined what we're talking about, let's get back to how this is going to help us fight zombies. Like I said off the top, the biggest key to protecting yourself during a zombie attack is to recognize the danger signs before it's too late. Check this out. Nope. Nope. Oh, that's a sad story. Oh, I'm just so broken up right now. Excuse me.
You okay?
No, it's not gonna work.
Man,
Okay.
Can I get you?
Bear with me.
You okay? Man, can I get you something like a glass of water? Anna, come here.
Anyone know her name?
Died without a name? Damn.
Guys, do you want to move into the other room?
Holy shit!
Wait for it. Boom.
Holy shit. Holy shit.
So here's my problem with that scene. At this point in the movie, she's seen zombies before. This isn't the first time she's seen a zombie. So she's got enough information to know that something's up. But, you know, that lady, by the way, totally looked like a zombie even while she was still alive. So it's completely unforgivable. But she doesn't heed any of the warning signs. She just pretends like it's any other day. Oh, it's a mysterious illness. I've never seen a fever like this before. You know, it doesn't make any sense. But her refusal or her inability to spot the warning signs, you know, she ends up putting not only herself in danger, but all of the people around her in danger too. The point is this. The zombies are dangerous when they're running at you. I mean, that's indisputable. But if you wait until the problem is obvious, then you're going to miss a lot of the warning signs that you could have used way upstream to get yourself to safety. But if you're smart and if you pay attention, you can see problems coming before they have time to get out of hand. Ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away. Even more than that, ignoring the problem can put you in danger. You can either end up getting chomped by someone who's let this racism zombie virus, overrun their brains, or worse, you can end up hurting someone around you because, we're all infected. Now, I don't have time in this presentation to give a full account of every single way that you can predict racism, but I'm going to give you a couple of cheats here. If anyone ever starts a sentence with, I don't want to sound racist, or I'm not a racist, but, then they're a zombie and you have to chop their heads off immediately. That sentence always ends with something racist. I have never in my life heard anyone say, I don't want to sound like a racist, but I could really use a nap. Or, I'm not a racist, but I just don't care for that new car smell. If you're starting the sentence that way, it's because you're about to do something racist. So don't go in there. This one. It's not possible that I'm racist because I do not indiscriminately hate every single black person on the planet. I even let one of you people cut my hair. You don't have a black friend. You have an excuse. And it's not even a good excuse. And chances are, if you did have a black friend, they would not appreciate being used as a shield in that way. Right, okay. So everyone knows that talking about something is what makes it happen. That's why we all hate the Canadian Cancer Society, right? Because they raise awareness about cancer, thus causing cancer. Boom. Okay, if I didn't hear this one so often, I would think that it was only ever meant as a joke, but there really are people out there who think that the election of a single black man to high office means that racism is now a thing of the past. This is like the black friend on steroids. A black president is not a rabbit in the Precambrian, to borrow a phrase. He's an outlier, a great outlier, but an outlier from a much larger and much more troubling trend.
Don't swing, don't swing! Swing!
Okay, all right. In order for something to be reverse racism, there has to be the correct direction for racism to go, and then this is like the reverse of that. I really don't have time, unfortunately, to give a full accounting of what affirmative action programs are or how they work, but suffice it to say that giving someone a leg up is not the same as chopping everyone else's heads off. Yeah, there are a lot more, and these aren't rare utterances either. Next time you see an online news story or maybe a blog post about a racial topic, scroll down to the comments. I guarantee you're going to see at least one of these. But now that you know how to recognize them, you can treat them with the appropriate intellectual gravity. Many times when people are confronted on making statements like this, they react defensively. It's totally understandable. No one wants to be thought of as racist, especially if they don't mean anything by it. I get that this conversation is hard. I find myself reacting defensively sometimes when people point out that I've done something or said something that's maybe misogynistic or homophobic. Especially when I'm someone who abhors racism. I work hard every day to try to combat it. And that's the thing to keep in mind. It's really, really easy to see when someone else is screwing up. It's a lot harder to accept that you might do it yourself from time to time. And it's even harder to be accused of something like racism and then to react by saying, yeah, you might be right. Here's something that I think might help. We can try to tear down this false dichotomy that we have between someone who is a racist and someone who is not a racist. Neither of these categories exists. We all screw up from time to time. We all engage in lousy cognition without really meaning to. Maybe this comparison sounds familiar to some people. Have you ever heard anyone get called for doing something really stupid or believing something really crazy, and then they say, "Nuh-uh, I'm a skeptic"? Self-identifying as a skeptic does not magically grant you a brain that is impervious from logical fallacies. Even skeptics are sometimes prone to make cognitive mistakes. Nobody's born with all the knowledge that they need to identify false claims, right? The whole skeptical movement is really just a bunch of people who are trying to get better about separating truth from fallacy and then helping other people do the same. It wasn't magic how we got to where we are. We had to take the time to learn and to study and to listen and to figure out how to spot what a lousy argument looks like. The best among us have learned not only how to identify it in other people, but turn that magnifying glass of inquiry back on ourselves. We've got a powerful tool in the null hypothesis. We know, for example, that there's no meaningful biological differences between different races. So then we got to ask ourselves, why do we see inequalities? What mechanisms can we think of that might cause those? How can we test those hypotheses? We've developed these techniques, we've learned to spot fallacies, we've learned to recognize bad arguments, we've got some ready refutations to some of the more common ones. We didn't start there, we worked to get there, and we're getting better all the time. Here's the thing, we won't make any progress at all if we don't learn to look at and talk about the problem. Race and racism are real. For some of us, they're a part of our daily lives. And if we're serious about expanding and growing this movement to include all kinds of people, then we have to do some growing ourselves. And part of that means learning to take on new challenges and new ideas like these. But if we succeed, and I really think that we can, what we gain is a movement that's not only bigger, but it's stronger. Diversity of opinion, diversity of experience means that we can draw on the perspectives of a wide range of skeptics and tackle problems from a bunch of different angles at the same time. We can also become more inclusive and more welcoming, a place where people feel that they can see themselves fitting in. And as people who care about the well-being of our fellow creatures, it's also the right thing to do. And so everyone, this is a call to arms. Do we courageously face up to the reality of racism in our society? Do we use our skeptical tools to pull back the smokescreen and confront the hard truths? Do we allow ourselves to feel uncomfortable where the evidence leads us, but go there anyway because that's where the truth is? Do we listen to those who have the experience and the knowledge and let them guide us? Or do we let the zombie hordes devour our brains? Thanks very much.